This is the plaintiff, William Amir Stevens. He says he purchased a used washing machine which was guaranteed to work from the defendant. And the thing worked twice, with only socks and underwear. When he put a full load in, the machine didn't work. He was out and out lied to and wants all of his $400 returned. So he's suing. This is the defendant, Misty. She says the guy had her machine in his house and used it for a while. And she has no idea what he did to the thing because it worked just fine when she sold it to him. The guy could have mishandled or abused the thing, or a part went out on it or something. Bottom line, that's not her responsibility, and she owes nothing. She's accused of being all wet.
All parties, please raise your right hands.
Welcome back to the People's Court. Next case on the docket. The plaintiff bought a washing machine from the defendant and says when it got home, the thing didn't work. But the defendant says the washer worked fine for him back in her house, and she has no idea what he did to break it once he got it home. It's the case of one vicious cycle.
Thank you, Douglas. Mr. Stevens, you're suing Ms. Misty for $400 that you want returned to you that you paid her for a washing machine, which according to you doesn't work. Tell me what happened.
Yes, Your Honor. So I found her ad on Facebook Marketplace, and she had it advertised as a 3-year-old washer that should work as good as new. I needed a washer at the time, so I went ahead and I contacted her. She responded to me and wanted to know if I wanted to come and pick it up or if for a small fee she could deliver it to me. At the time, I didn't have my car, so I said, yeah, you can just come and deliver it. And I asked if $25 on top of the $375 price would be okay for that. She said yes. Her and her husband then brought the washer over to my house. I hooked it up. I paid them, and they left.
When you say you hooked it up, what do you mean?
I plugged in the washer to the outlets and made sure I plugged in all the right hookups and everything like that.
Right. With them there?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So how did you, before you hand them the money, when they deliver it, how do you test it to make sure it works?
I didn't test it at that moment. I was waiting for my maintenance guy to come in and help me set it up. So That's what happened there.
All right. Did they actually offer to help you set it up?
No, they asked to help me get it in the house.
Okay. And according to you, Ms. Misty, did you guys offer to set it up?
Yes, Your Honor, we did. At first, I offered him to come over to the house and have it see in action before he went through the trouble of, disconnecting it and hauling it over there. He says he trusts us. We wheel it over. We offer him 2 times to actually get it inside his house and hook it up, but he said 2 times that his maintenance guy was already on his way over to swap it out. So we gave him the opportunity to, 1, see it at our house, and then 2, have it hooked up at his house.
So did he test it at all before he paid you? Did he plug it in to hear if it would nothing? Just nothing. Okay.
No.
All right. So then what happens, Mr. Stevens? Tell me what happens when your handyman comes and he installs it and says, okay, everything's great, right?
He hooks it up. He helps me hook it up. And
I presume he tested it to make sure he hooked it up right?
Yes, ma'am.
And everything was fine.
He tested it.
Okay.
He did the standard check, which usually happens with appliance sales like that, and he just made sure the water was draining okay and drained out.
All right, so then you do the wash, and what happens when you first use it?
So I got ready to use the wash, and it didn't work at all. The device turned on. It drained. It poured water into the mechanism, but it didn't do anything after that. It just sat there for probably 2 hours. So at that point, I messaged the defendant, and I was like, hey, this thing isn't even running a proper cycle. It's not doing anything. At that point, the defendant then told me, you might have to do a diagnostic check on it. I said, okay. I ran the diagnostic check, and the washer then did correctly work. It did 1 to 2 cycles. I was able to get a couple of my clothes washed with it.
Wait, when you say it did 1 to 2 cycles and you could get a couple of your clothes washed with it, I presume that you did a full load.
I did a small load just to make sure that everything was working okay.
Okay, and was it working okay?
It worked okay with the small load.
Okay, and then what happens?
The next time I used it was maybe 2 days later. And when I went to use it, I just put in some towels and I went to do the cycle. It it ran everything until the spin cycle. Then it just would not spin it at all. So it would fill it up with water, it would agitate, and it would never go to the spin cycle. So I then messaged out to her again. I said, "Hey, it worked, but now it's not working at all. It's the same problem, like, or not the same problem, but it's still not washing my clothes." And she didn't respond to me for quite some time. I then sent her some videos of my towels that weren't getting washed at all. And I showed her where I would tell it to do the spin cycle, like skip everything else, just do the spin cycle. And it wouldn't even do the spin cycle. You can see I'll stick my hand in there to grab the towels and I'm squeezing it, and water is 100% just drenched into that towel and pouring over my hand like a waterfall back into the washing unit.
So what happens then? Do you contact her again?
I contact her again and I asked her, I was like, let's be decent about this. You know, clearly this isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. And at first she didn't respond, then she responded. Um, I will say, like, sometimes emotions and stuff in a text message may not come across the way they should.
That's right. That's so
she,
right. It is so much better, as I tell my children all the time, for human beings to talk to each other, because if you don't, if you just do it by text, you might read the text with the wrong intonation and get angry or offended or feel like the person is abusing you. Whereas if you talk to each other and you see their facial expressions and you hear the angst in their voice, you might feel empathy, right? Yeah. So what happens? When you say that, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. So she responds, and it was a pretty long message, pretty much, you know, saying that it was just user error and all these things like that. And so I, at the time, because I was frustrated with the washer not working, I took that as, I was like, well, all I did was just put some towels in here. Like, are you trying to insinuate that a machine that's quite literally, you put clothes in it, you hit the button, it does its thing, you're telling me I didn't do that correctly? She also mentioned in one of those messages that I should be using the correct soap products, which all the soap products I use Tide. It even says, like, has a little HE symbol on it, which is what she was telling me I needed to be using, something like that. So I was doing that. I wasn't using anything strange. I wasn't overfilling it. Like I said, Your Honor, those were like 2 or 3 towels that were in there. So I've never had a washer that couldn't, you know, run a cycle and spin out 3 towels.
Let me hear from you, Ms. Misty.
Yes, Your Honor. So most of what Mr. Stevens said was true. Have a little bit more detail to provide. So that evening of purchase, he sends me a message asking where the dispenser unit was, said he'd been trying to run a load for 2 hours and couldn't get it to work, and said immediately he'd like to return it. I replied saying that he might want to press and hold the main button to reset it, and to let me know how that went. I didn't hear from him for a few days. I figured that was a trick, wouldn't be hearing from him again. On 3/8 around midnight, he sends a message that it worked until today, only worked for maybe 2 to 3 small loads. He stated he had to go to the laundromat. It didn't spin the towels dry. Some of his towels were ruined. He has to go buy new ones, and threatened to get the law involved if I don't return his money. The next day at 11:52, he stated that, again, it worked for 2 to 3 small loads. Stated again that most of his clothes and towels are pretty much ruined, and if he did not receive a response today, he'd be seeking legal action. At 8:30 p.m., he stated that he's given me ample time to respond. He's already filed in the small claims court. I looked at the small claims timestamp of the paperwork, and it showed that he filed the case at 12:53. So from his 11:52 to 12:53 message, you know, he gave me 1 hour to respond today. Yes, and I feel bad, and you're right. There's a lot of nuance in writing. I saw the video. The video I saw was the 1 towel left wet, and when he mentioned the lengthy message, I did try to troubleshoot. You know, there's a lot of variables involved. I stated that he said it worked for 2 to 3 small loads, and I asked what kind of loads they were, if they were different than what he was showing in his video. Stated that he might want to try the medium to large loader, not washing, you know, towels, jeans, or heavy stuff on a small loader at the same time. Stated that washers can be overloaded, also underloaded, which can affect the spin cycle. Suggested, you know, double check that it's level. Sent him a link for the installation guide as well as the use guide.
And then told him that he might want to start with these things before accusing you of lying and telling you that you are passing off a bad product and threatening with the law in small claims case. When we delivered it, you expected us to drop it off in your carport. We were expecting to bring it inside and get it hooked up for you. We brought it inside but couldn't hook it up because you had the other one in its place and said your maintenance guy would be coming over to set it up for you. I also offered for you to come to my house to see it in action before we brought it over to you. When you first tried to run a load, you automatically assumed it didn't work and immediately wanted a refund. Then somehow you got it to work, which I am assuming was through the reset button. This is a modern machine, basically a computer that washes clothes, so things have to be just right for it to perform correctly. So please consider it could be user error. And then you file the lawsuit.
Correct. And I also posted, you see there that there's an image of a...
How much does this thing cost new?
Almost $800.
How long before that had you bought it?
Me, I had it maybe a year and a half or so. I was the second owner of it, but we used it and we had an extra set that was gifted to us. So we had a washer and dryer set that was gifted to us.
And then you say in your message to her, Mr. Stevens, nowhere did you state it is all sales final or take it as is.
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
There was nowhere on the ad where she said anything like that. But I would like to add one thing, if I may.
Yeah.
So she stated that I immediately filed. That's not true at all. I did give her at least 2 days to respond to me, in which she did not respond. So it doesn't take 2 days to respond back to a message. So I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and do this.
What day did you file the lawsuit? You can file the lawsuit whenever you want. It doesn't matter, but I'm just curious since you're bringing it up as a response.
I want to say it was...
Go ahead.
Off the top of my head, I want to say it was the 11th.
And what day did she give you the response?
I didn't get a response from her until that same day. The same day that I filed was the same day I got a response from her.
I know. And she responded at 10:53 that day, and you filed at what time? Right after that.
I had filed that same day earlier, probably around 9 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, I see what you're saying. And when had you written to her? 2 days before her response?
I had pretty much typed that into her at least 24 hours. I know for a fact on that.
Yeah, I think it was slightly less than 24 hours. But it really, look, all that's academic. I have one issue in front of me. And the issue in front of me is, did she breach the terms of the contract of your sale?
Welcome back to the People's Court. The plaintiff wants to return the broken-down washing machine he bought from the defendant. The defendant says, no way, there was no guarantee. Let's go back into the courtroom and find out who wins.
You feel that because it doesn't work or doesn't work well or doesn't work after 2 workings, that means she breached. And I have to tell you, like, when I look at this, my first gut, as if I weren't a lawyer and a judge, my first gut would be, hey, you know, this thing didn't work after a couple of, I didn't want to buy something that didn't work. I want to buy something that did work. But here's the rub. Whenever you buy something that is used, whether they list it or not as with the magical words as is or all sales final, whether they mention it or not by operation of law and by default, it is final and it is as is, which means that when you're buying a used item, you have to test it out to make sure it's to your satisfaction. And you should always go to the place, make the time to go to the place and test it out there and see that it works before you invest $300 and something. But you did something like, instead of going to BrandsMart and paying $800 or $900 for this item, you bought it used in the used market. So you got the advantage of that, but you don't want the disadvantage. The advantage is you can get some really good deals. The disadvantage is it's buyer beware. And that's what it is in this case. So I feel bad that it doesn't work for you, but I'm hoping that you avail yourself of all of the things she mentioned in that really long email or text message on Facebook Marketplace. But it's going to be up to you to get this repaired, because when you buy it, it is as is, whether she says it or not. Okay? So I'm sorry,
yes,
but my
ma'am.
ruling in this case is in favor of the defendant. Good luck to you guys.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So the plaintiff fails to win this lawsuit. The defendant prevails, and the plaintiff is stuck with a washing machine that doesn't work for him. He doesn't get $400 back. I feel sorry for you, Mr. Stevens, but do you understand what the judge said? It's buyer beware, and that's what you do.
Of course I understand what the judge said. I've been a long time watching fan of this show anyway. So I respect the judge and what she had to say.
All right, Misty, are you upset that he came back at you like this and that you had? I gather you didn't expect that to happen. Am I right?
I certainly did not, Doug. And I feel bad that it was unfortunate timing. I mean, he said, I think 4 times in writing, including his small claims paperwork, that it worked up to including 3 times. So if it truly didn't work after the 3rd time, then, I think that's just unfortunate timing. Had it never worked from the get-go, he would have promptly gotten his money back. So I feel bad for the unfortunate timing of it all, but I'm glad the judge decided, and it's over with.
Okay.
Thank you for the
All
opportunity.
Right, very good. You're very welcome. Thank you, ma'am. And that'll do it for this case. Harvey, what are your thoughts?
Okay, Doug, this is pretty common. The washing machine was bought as is, which means the only way to undo the deal is to prove some kind of fraud, a material misrepresentation. If the defendant knew the washer was broken and lied about it, it wasn't the case here, the plaintiff loses.
My bike has been stolen from my shed twice in the last 3 months. My friend says he can rig a shotgun to go off at someone's legs if they open the door. Can I do it? Oy.
No, you cannot do it. This has been tried a number of times. People put these spring-loaded weapons. There's a very famous case out of Iowa from about 50 years ago involving some homeowners who had a farmhouse that was boarded up and abandoned. They owned it, and they put no trespassing signs all around it. And they had some antiques inside that they just left inside of it. People kept breaking in. They had constant burglaries and break-ins. So one of them took a 20-gauge shotgun and loaded it up with a spring-activated device so that if the door opened, it would shoot the person coming in. And his wife talked him into keeping it down low, so it would shoot them in the legs and not kill them. Well, one of the burglars who had been there before comes back, opens the door, it shoots him in the leg, almost blows his leg off. He spends 40 days in the hospital. He's very seriously injured, and he sues the homeowners. He wins a judgment for punitive damages and compensatory damages that was substantial. So it could ruin you financially. It could kill somebody, and
it might give you a lot of satisfaction,
right?
But your satisfaction will be short-lived.
It will be short-lived,
Yeah.
and you can never use deadly force in defense of just some personal
and
property.
it's just wrong. I mean, it's wrong.
It's
also.
morally wrong.
It's morally wrong. I know you're frustrated. You don't want any more thefts.
Right.
But
now maybe a beehive in there or something.
I know a good apiarist.
Something like that. You know, I notice nobody ever goes near beehives. If you could you could have a friend of mine down in Miami has honeybees and keeps them in his yard, and I always stay away from that part of the yard.
Yep.
So, unless you want to get stung.